So for me in my role, it's great because, like I say, I get exposure to all data across McLaren and as well all the series that we work with. So, for example, in Extreme E, we've got our drivers Emma Gilmore and Tanner, and we work closely with them and their race engineers to implement Alteryx, use their data and see what we can do in that series. It's our first year competing in it, so all the data we take in and any projects we do in Alteryx, they're all new and they're all helpful to the team. So ultimately, again, we're just trying to make the team go faster and bring that extra performance.
Welcome to Alter Everything, a podcast about data science and analytics culture. I'm Dan Menke, Manager of Community Operations at Alteryx, and I'm a huge F1 fan. I love everything about it, from the drivers, the cars, and the data behind the races. Luckily for a fan like me, Alteryx and McLaren have an awesome partnership. So I sat down with Jess Tompkins, technical analyst at McLaren, to talk about Alteryx and how McLaren is using it across the organization.
Whether it's spatial mapping to see if we can find the perfect line, see if we can interpret for the Extreme E drivers, driving through gates, is it better to go round? All sorts of dilemmas there.
From different departments to analyzing race data and making quick decisions on the go for their drivers, it was so much fun diving into the data with Jess. Let's get started.
So I'm Jess Tompkins. I'm a technical analyst at McLaren Racing. So I work with all our technical partners, integrating their software, their hardware, all across McLaren, ultimately to try and make the team and trying to make us race faster.
I love that your use case is race faster. I love that. Learning a little bit about you took like a different kind of path, not even just like into the work world, but like into McLaren. Can you kind of talk about how your experience was, like, after your secondary school? You kind of went to college and you kind of didn't. Can you kind of explain it? Because it was really interesting to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a bit of a unique path, especially in the UK as well. When I finished my A-levels, in which that was about 17, you start those, you do those for 2 years. I picked maths, business and physics, so already knew I wanted to be in the world of data and numbers. Didn't really resonate well with words, so I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after that. I didn't really want to go to university full time, didn't want to pay for it, didn't want to be in debt, wasn't really sure. So I went and spoke to my careers advisor at school, and at the time there was only 4 types of integrated degree you could do, which is basically an apprenticeship where you work full time every day of the week, they pay you to be there, and then on a Tuesday it was for me, I'd go to university. So I was in the workplace for 4 years, every Tuesday going to university and getting a degree at the same time. So they pay you and they pay for your degree, which is great. And at the end of it, you get 4 years real life work experience and also a degree at the end of it. So that was sort of my journey after school and how I managed to get a degree and both the experience at the same time. Following that, I also had a separate love for F1 in the background and went to my first F1 race just randomly with one of my friends. I went to Barcelona, and that's sort of where I made the connection between the two, so my love of data and my love of F1. So yeah, sort of following that, I applied for a job at McLaren, sort of really randomly for me. My initial thoughts was that I wanted to be a strategist, so I wanted to sit on the pit wall, look at the data, make live decisions. That's where I thought I wanted to go. I applied for the job that I have now currently as a technical analyst, so really wasn't sure what it entailed at the time, and sort of opened my eyes to the commercial world of F1 and sponsors and data. Which in the end, I'm kind of glad I found this route because you get exposed to a whole different world. You get to go and see all sorts of partners, all sorts of technology, and really work to improve the team by spreading that sponsorship and spreading the technology across the team.
And are you working not only when you're looking at the technology piece, you're not just looking at one area of McLaren, right? Like you're looking at, is it like HR and marketing and stuff like that? Are you looking at all of that for everybody, or is it just certain specific departments that you're looking at?
Yeah, so it's really great. So in my role, I get my hands on everyone's data across all different departments. So for example, deploying Alteryx across McLaren, I go and speak to people, whether it's in HR, production, quality, the wind tunnel team. I hear their pain points, hear what they're doing with data, and introduce them to a software like Alteryx and say, this is how it's going to make you go faster. Let's work together on developing your skills. I'll also support them in that. Alteryx supports them in that. And it's really a great deployment. It's never focused in one area. It's really a team spirit.
And so you testing out Alteryx, what did you think? What were your sort of first impressions of that?
Yeah.
Because obviously you have a data background in math and all this stuff, and probably talking to other people, you learned SQL and things like that in the programming language. When you saw Alteryx, what was your kind of first impressions of that?
Yeah, so pretty early on in my role was exposed to Alteryx, which was, a number of software partners that we use and we talk to. I think, as I said, it was really early on. I was sort of lost in getting used to McLaren, getting used to a new role, learning everything around me. And as part of that, got introduced to Alteryx. I think it sounds a bit cheesy, but it was almost calming to me to have a data software that I could relate to. I always understood data and numbers, they don't change. So as I'm adapting to McLaren, I can relate to a software like Alteryx. So initially had an intro with it, with the Alteryx team, a really short sort of 45-minute introduction. I think that's really great, and what's unique about Alteryx is you don't need long to see the software and work out what it does. It's self-explanatory, it's user-friendly, and after that 45-minute session, you're away. You put your data in and you're off and you're doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's great. So these use cases that you're getting from all over the place, are you seeing like, okay, can I do this in Alteryx first? Or are you like implementing it into the department, or are you doing it both ways?
Yeah, so it works in both ways. It's really great for me, like networking within McLaren, talking to individuals across the team. So yeah, if I use HR, for example, they'll come to me and they said, here are our pain points. This is what we do. And sometimes they don't even realize it. They think, this is it. This is how it gets done. It takes me 15 hours and that's it. And I think it's really opening their eyes up and sort of spreading the knowledge of the software we have available. Have you heard of Alteryx? This is what it does. And I think from that moment, even those conversations, it's a 5-10 minute conversation. There's a better way of doing this. How can I automate it? And they're really, interested in upskilling themselves and learning the software for themselves.
So you're not necessarily trying to solve people's problems. You're also trying to talk to them about how Alteryx can almost create opportunities for them to solve things maybe they didn't even know they needed solving.
Yeah, so I'd love to say I could self-sufficiently build all Alteryx models across McLaren, but It just doesn't work like that. We've got so much data and, we're such a fast-paced team. We need to speed up our processes and streamline wherever we can. So great for me because I get to learn the tool and use data and build workflows myself, but also be an enabler so that there's individuals across all departments that know how to use Alteryx as well.
Cool. Have you had so far like a particular project that you were really excited about using Alteryx and bringing it to that department because you knew that this was going to have such a big impact?
I think for me, there's some departments that I know and I hear of and I'm like, you know what, let me come to you, let me tell you about it. And that was sort of the initial stages when I first got going with Alteryx and McLaren. I think it's great now that, it's so far spread across McLaren. The day before I flew out here, I had someone come to me and I said, hey, look, I've got a use case. Can you tell me how to use Alteryx? I want to use it. Really interesting one across the quality of our parts, how we manufacture them. Can we predict, if the part's going to fail, how long it takes, and any comments we've made on these parts, can we automate that and, identify these things before they happen? So, it's really great that we're at that point that the knowledge and the awareness of Alteryx has spread across McLaren and, have people coming to me for their very own use cases every day.
That's really cool. So you're working across, like, even the teams, right? So even, like, Extreme E with Formula One, are you doing with the IndyCar and stuff like that too, or just mainly in the UK teams?
Yeah, so for me in my role, it's great because, like I say, I get exposure to all data across McLaren and as well all the series that we work with. So, for example, in Extreme E, we've got our drivers Emma Gilmore and Tanner, and we work closely with them and their race engineers to implement Alteryx, use their data and see what we can do in that series. It's our first year competing in it, so all the data we take in and any projects we do in Alteryx, they're all new and they're all helpful to the team. So ultimately, again, we're just trying to make the team go faster and bring that extra performance.
So do you think as you guys, because I know that you've only had one race so far, right? So are you excited to keep getting more and more data with this as this series goes on and being able to make adjustments to the cars and things like that?
Yeah, so it's really great for us to see as we get the extra layers of data, we progress in the series into the next race and we pull the data back and we put it all into Alteryx. It becomes that sort of central source of truth for us, even through like data gathering, checking sensors, all of it will now live in Alteryx for Extreme E. So yeah, definitely really excited to get a hold of more data and see where we can be at the end of the year.
That's really cool. Since you've gotten Alteryx, is there something like on your bucket list that you're interested in using? Are there like tools that you haven't used yet that you know about that you'd be interested in using?
as, deploying across different use cases means they get access to different tools, whether it's spatial mapping to see if we can find the perfect line, see if we can interpret for the Extreme E drivers, driving through gates, is it better to go round? All sorts of dilemmas there. And yeah, again, with that becomes using a range of tools. I think we're looking into discovering auto insights and what that can do for McLaren. So really interested to explore that and find a data set to look into.
So we ask this a lot of our users. Do you have a favorite tool that you like to use that's like your go-to tool to play with in the software?
I think the more simplistic tools are just so understated, and I can't emphasize enough the value they bring to McLaren. So sometimes some of our use cases in the scope of Alteryx and the tools available, they're the more simplistic tools that seem simple to very heavy data users. But for example, in our HR department, that simple data manipulation, pulling data in from different sources, manipulating it and saving those workflows, it saves them 15 hours a month. So, in the scale of Alteryx, simple tools, but for us in McLaren, it's saving us hours. And as that small and fast-paced team, we need those wins.
So because there's a tremendous amount of different data that you're working with, right? Like you have the HR data like you were talking about, right? And then you have all this race data. How difficult is it for you to like jump from data set to data set being completely different, whether one's numbers or it could be people, right? With HR, things like that. How are you able to just jump around like that?
I think for me, it's exploring one use case at a time, getting stuck into it. And like I say, it's that enablement that's really great there. So it's not me taking on the full load of each data set. I'm really enabling the team. So I'm working with them. The workload is shared, and using Alteryx, the tool's just, so user-friendly and easily adapted to each type of data set, and relates back to, at the end of the day, it's data. So just changing the form of it, exploring what you want to do with it and having a clear idea of, how it works, what you want to achieve, that sort of makes it sort of an easier task dealing with different data sets.
What sort of analysis are you doing, say for the Extreme E? You mentioned the spatial mapping, which is really cool to see, but they have a very crazy variable. It's not like they're on the road, right? So do you get data like that that's like, oh, the temperature's out or the track is hot, things like that? Or do you take those types of things into consideration for that?
Yeah, so it's hard to say we've explored everything. We haven't. And there's so much data, we're always thinking, what's a priority for us at this moment in time? Currently with Alteryx and Extreme E, we do lots of sensory checks prior to the race. So before Emma or Tanner can get into the car, we're doing wheel speed checks, steering checks, all sort of sensor checks, torque on the car to make sure everything's within range. Automating that within Alteryx, saves the race engineers on the day loads of time, which is great for us to see. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of a starting base for Alteryx and Extreme E. We've started exploring what we can do next and how we can bring actually performance to the team. So the spatial mapping and finding the sort of perfect fit line, which is very different to F1. Like you say, the course is completely interpretable. So you can go 10 metres left, 10 metres right, as long as you pass through the waypoints, you won't get a fault for it. So tons of data there to explore. That's one of the big ones for us. We want to give Tanner and Emma some insight into some guidance really, around each track, what would be the best lines to take, and we love to take their feedback as well and overlay that with the data and give them somewhere to look.
Yeah, and compared to like Extreme E, compared to Formula One, on the ground at least, there's a much smaller team there, right? I think it's like one race engineer and 3 or 4 mechanics or something like that. So I would imagine Alteryx is really helping you guys to provide that data because you don't have 100 other people running through and sending data like maybe the Formula One team does.
Yeah, so in the Extreme E team, I work really closely with their performance engineer and their lead race engineer, and I make them enablers of Alteryx as well, giving them the skill set, giving them Alteryx licenses, and creating contacts within Alteryx as well. They become enablers and they become self-sufficient, so they can look at the data themselves. I can support them on that, and as a process as a whole, brings great value to the team.
That's awesome. Do you help in some of the debriefs, help with the data, things like that after the races?
So at that point, our enablers should be self-sufficient. So as a race or performance engineer that's using Alteryx, if I've done my job well, then they should be self-sufficient enough to use Alteryx, be in the race debrief, and use the data themselves.
Nice. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the enablement that you do across the organization?
Yeah, so working really closely with Alteryx and sort of the way we work and the way they work has been the perfect outcome for us. Introducing our users to Alteryx, hearing their pain points, and then working with Alteryx to set up workshops is really a great process. And we streamline that by saying, bring your own data. It's pointless us having a 3-hour conversation with no data in front of us. Right. So they turn up with their own data, we talk to Alteryx, get a demo, and get sort of a live build on the go. And from that, we get a workflow already created. We've already solved half the problem. And then following that enablement, we've got loads of curious users across McLaren. And I guess it sort of allows us to roll that out on a wider scale, from wind tunnel analysis, where some of our employees have got PhD degrees, or down to simple Excel usage. Users like that, they can share those workflows and build out further and explore data sets in that way.
Yeah, it's almost like, to me, going across the org like that, and especially because of what you guys are doing, it's almost like passing those things along. Everybody can just keep building off of those things, because it's almost like you're building a car, but you're using the data from each of these departments, and people can look at it a certain way and then say, okay, now let's add our piece to this and move across the org until they almost like build this giant workflow with everybody's information on it, giving you information for specific things.
Yeah, the way we share those workflows across the team has become super powerful. It's removed the aspect of having 100 lines of code saved on someone's desktop, and publishing those workflows, having them easily accessible, means as a team, we can explore analysis in all different areas. Any user can give it a go, from tire pressures to those use cases in Extreme E. Those workflows are published and accessible for everyone in the team.
That's really cool. So I was at the Miami Grand Prix a couple of weekends ago, and where I was sitting, every time Lando or Daniel went by, the crowd went absolutely bananas. And it's known that you guys have probably the biggest fan base out of any of the Formula One teams. Are you using Alteryx to kind of propel those fans to get them more information, or to bring in more fans?
Yeah, so we've worked on small scale projects before, looking at social media, doing sentiment analysis in Alteryx, and sort of seeing what our fans think lap by lap on a race. Brings super powerful insights to the team. I think looking forward, we'd love to pull sort of our separate internal data sets, whether we're looking at e-commerce data or fan data, and overlay those in Alteryx with that previous work we've done, and really see the power of what fans think and overlay that with our existing data.
Yeah, it was very interesting being at the race like that. I'd never experienced anything like that. It was my first Grand Prix. And to see all the people with all the different, usually when you go to an event, at least the events I've been to, a sporting event, it's one team against another team. Or there's, 10 teams or however many teams there are, and people walking around. And so the simple fact of, there's Ferrari fans sitting next to us and Mercedes fans sitting by me, but when those two guys came flying by, the crowd would go nuts. So it was pretty wild to see that. And I definitely saw a lot more papaya walking around Miami than any other color, which was really cool to see.
Yeah, I think sometimes I forget that I have the privilege of diving into all these data sets. It becomes my daily norm. So for us, actually reaching out and gathering fan sentiment analysis and gathering fans' thoughts is a really powerful aspect for us. And we really look forward to analysing that data.
Were you surprised by that when you came to McLaren? Did you know that McLaren was that popular?
I think as a fan of F1, everyone has their favourite teams. For me, I'm not even sure I had one in particular, but coming to such a great team like McLaren and the history and everything you learn whilst there, I think, again, sometimes I forget the power that has on the public and F1 fans in general. So it's great to ground yourself sometimes, have another re-evaluation of the data, and sort of think, the privilege we get of working with this team.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jess. We really appreciate you taking the time and talking to us. It was a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure, so thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening. For more on Extreme E, Alteryx Auto Insights, and the Alteryx and McLaren partnership, check out our show notes at community.alteryx.com/podcast. So did you get to go to the races?
Some of the races. So I went to, I've just come back from the IndyCar race.
Oh, nice.
Did the Speedway just last weekend in the rain.
Yeah, I watched that race.
was amazing, wasn't it?
Even the rain, the crazy rain.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
First wet race in 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was watching it on TV, and they had Alteryx on the back of one of the cars.
Yeah.
On Juan Pablo's, and I think he was like way back in 20th for like most of the race. But this rain came in and it got crazy. And he moved all the way up to like 5th or something like that. And then literally like on the last lap, I don't remember even what happened, but he crashed. But of course on TV there's a big Alteryx sign.
Yeah.
A guy that crashed, but so what?
That's the first
I was
thing
like,
I
hey.
That's the first thing,
Yeah.
I noticed they had all the cameras on the car, the big Alteryx on the back.
Yeah.